Thursday, May 18th, 2023. A cool and sunny day dawns in New York City as the community gathers for their 129th commencement ceremony of the Jewish Theological Seminary. The commencement ceremony's address is being given by Rabbi Arthur Green, a distinguished scholar of Jewish mysticism and Hasidism. The 82-year-old professor begins by recalling his own ordination from JTS on June 4th, 1967, the day before war broke out in Israel, when a young Elie Wiesel gave the commencement address. Dr. Green then describes the profound challenges facing both Israel and American Judaism today. He concludes with a stirring charge to the graduates. "I'm now near the end of my creative course," he says, "but you young people are just at the beginning of yours. We need you to enroll, however you can, in the task of the generations, that of recreating Judaism for our time. We need you in this battle." The audience of future Jewish leaders, I am told, leaps to their feet to applaud. Someone who witnessed the commencement described to me their own rather different response. "I remember my own graduation years ago," he told me. "We heard the same kind of message. The world is in a dire state, and you have to go out and make it better." You know, they say the same thing every year in all these graduation speeches, but the world is still a mess. Nothing changes, nothing gets better. I'm struck by how many times I've heard similar comments this year from Bethel members, particularly older members, reflecting on what's happening in our country. You talk about anti-Semitism, voting rights, reproductive rights, censorship, disdain for science and reason, gun violence, racism, sexism, poverty, and war, and say things like, "Everything seems to be getting worse. We're going backwards. I can't believe that my children and grandchildren have to face these problems. I thought we were past this." You lament that the progress we've made is being undone, that the time and effort you invested in activism decades ago was all for naught. One person said to me, "It feels hollow even to say Shana Tova this year, because things are just so bad and they don't seem to get better from year to year." Younger people feel a similar sense of despair. It feels like we've been handed a world that just keeps getting darker. Democracies descending into autocracies, bigotry and white supremacy moving into the mainstream, polarization and hatred tearing us apart, climate change bringing misery to millions. Whatever our age, it's easy to end up with the same grim conclusion. The pendulum may swing, but nothing really changes for the better. In 2017, the Pew Research Center asked people from 38 countries from around the world whether they thought life was better or worse in their countries 50 years ago. A plurality of Americans, 41%, said they thought it was better back then. Reflecting on these survey results, Joshua Rothman wrote in The New Yorker, "In 1967, the United States was embroiled in the Vietnam War. Protest marches were taking place around the country, crime was surging, and race riots were breaking out in Detroit, Newark, Milwaukee, and other cities. That spring, a wave of tornadoes injured thousands across the Midwest. Members of the Black Panther Party carrying shotguns and rifles marched into the California State House to protest a racially motivated gun control law. And in June, the Six-Day War broke out. Americans lived in smaller houses, ate worse food, worked more hours, and died on average 7 years earlier. On the other hand, NASA launched several moon probes, and Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced helped launch the Summer of Love. By an obscure retrospective calculus, the good appears to balance out the bad. Frightening events seem less so in retrospect. Memory is selective, history is partial, and youth is a golden age. For all these reasons, our intuitive comparisons between the past and the present are unreliable. Many Americans living in 1967 might well have thought that life had been better in 1917. As Rothman and others point out, it's hard to say objectively whether the world is getting better or worse. By many measures, quality of life around the world has improved dramatically. In other ways, it has declined. And we can't tell at any given moment whether we're experiencing a long-term gain or a short-term blip. Unexpected events can shape the world in massive, unpredictable ways, for better or for worse. And of course, so much of our own happiness depends on our own personal circumstances and temperament. But here's one thing I know. Despair is a dangerous state of mind. It can lead a society to make rash political choices. It can lead individuals into apathy, disengagement, paralysis, or self-harm. So how can we avoid feeling that life is a treadmill, that we keep running without getting to a better place? By now, you probably know me well enough to guess what I'm going to say next. Judaism can help with that. And you're right, I do believe that Judaism can lead us back from the edge of the abyss, can help us stay out of the profoundly dangerous pitfall of despair. Here's one way that Jewish tradition supports me in my own journey toward hope. It's a simple message, but for me it has ultimate importance. Let's call it small things matter. Our tradition teaches us to focus on finding pleasure, meaning, and purpose in small acts of goodness. It insists that every single action has value. Take, for instance, the famous Talmudic statement about how we should think of ourselves on Rosh Hashanah, which is called Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment, as balanced evenly between merit and sin, with each deed we do tipping the scales one way or the other. Maimonides goes even further, asserting that every act we perform has a transformative impact on the world, and that we should remember this lesson all year long, not just on the high holy days. Our sages frame this idea in a way that may seem exaggerated and extreme, but they're doing so in order to dispel a pervasive sense of fatalism and helplessness, the belief that we're merely victims of overwhelming problems and forces beyond our control, so it doesn't matter what we do. But we are wrong. Our vision is distorted, and we need to be reminded of that. Every act we perform is significant. Every act changes the world in some way. Rashi as well reminds us not to discount the importance of small deeds. Citing a verse in Devarim, Ekev asher tishma'un et hamishpatim ha'eleh, if you obey these rules and observe them faithfully, God will maintain the covenant with you. He connects ekev, if, with the word akev, heel, and says, these are mitzvot kalot, those we call minor mitzvot, the ones we trample under our heels. I see the importance, the greatness of small deeds every day at Bethel. Throughout this past year, members of our men's club drove a fellow member to and from the hospital for cancer treatment. Another member drove an elder to the hospital after a fall and stayed with them until they were settled. Someone picked up groceries for a person battling illness. A young mother cooked nourishing meals for new parents. A parent of teens made a special effort to attend Shiva Minyanim, even when she did not know the mourners, because she wanted them to know that they're part of a community that cares. Retirees volunteer each week at the Interfaith Food Pantry of the Oranges. Another makes calls for Moms Demand Action, an organization fighting to end gun violence. The Bethel community is filled with mensches who rarely, if ever, receive recognition, but I see the difference they make. When I feel myself sinking into despair about the state of the world, I remember these beautiful acts, and I think of a poem by Danusha Lamaris about the sacred value of everyday acts of civility. It's called Small Kindnesses. I've been thinking about the way, when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by, or how strangers still say, bless you, when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back. for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make together when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat." I love the poet's lesson that each time we show kindness and courtesy to another person, we create a mikdash me'at, a small sanctuary in the midst of a world that can be callous and cold. But it's not just these small interpersonal acts that matter. In a piece called My Ode to Small Things, Jewish studies professor Paul Sakin discusses the shamir, a tiny worm that, according to Talmudic legend, chiseled the huge stones used by King Solomon to build the first temple. We need not take this legend literally to see its meaning. The greatest of projects, writes Sakin, are completed by small actions that cumulatively result in important ventures. We know that at the center of sovereign Israel there stood the temple for hundreds of years, but we forget that the temple and the nation were built and sustained by individuals working together for the common good. It's a subtle but critical reminder that the ordinary, anonymous people are what constitute civil society. What Dr. Sakin says is true. Small, individual deeds have a monumental impact on the public good. They build a holy temple in our midst. They bring incalculable blessings, bridges and highways, clean water, life-saving drugs, increased opportunities, educated, compassionate children, benefits that touch millions of lives. And behind every significant social change are legions of people who march, petition, organize, speak up at meetings, write letters, and never fail to vote. Misery is diminished with each can of donated food, each house built by Habitat for Humanity, each refugee family supported, each lonely person befriended, each bowl of soup served to someone who needs comfort and care. It reminds me of George Eliot's magnificent words in Middlemarch. The growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who have lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. Eliot knew that such people, even if they are someday forgotten, matter profoundly. Because of them, the world grows better. On Friday night, we chant one of my favorite verses from the Psalms, Or zarua la tzadik u'lishrei lev simcha. Light is sown for the righteous, radiance for the upright. The poet teaches that light is sown, zarua, from zera, the word for seed. With each righteous action, a little light is planted like a seed. Imagine every act of goodness as a tiny seed of light. The doer does not know what will become of that seed and how far the light will travel. We may often doubt the impact of our deeds, and we all know of gifted people in history who felt like failures, whose work went unrecognized in their lifetime. Yet they persisted, even when it was hard, and so should we. Our tradition promises that these little seeds, sown patiently and diligently over time, bring radiant light to the world. That's why, even in dark years like this one, we wish each other Shana Tova, a year of experiencing life's goodness, a year of doing good and believing in the good. A final story to bring us solace, and it's true, which makes it even better. As this new year begins, something amazing is happening all over the globe. Green islands are popping up, changing the landscape of the world. People are planting tiny forests, roughly the size of a basketball court, transforming dusty highway shoulders, parking lots, unused schoolyards, junkyards, landfills, even a prison. The tiny forest movement began in Japan, and it has spread across Europe, Africa, South America, the Middle East, and now here in the United States. The concept, called the Miyawaki method, is simple. By planting native plants very densely in enriched soil, the forest grows quickly. as much as 10 times the speed of conventional tree planting, so the trees can more efficiently absorb carbon dioxide, clean the air, and provide a refuge for wildlife, a wealth of birds, animals, and insects. The forest requires intensive labor at the beginning, but after 3 years it becomes self-sustaining and requires no watering or weeding. In urban areas, the tiny forests help lower air temperature. In rural areas, they improve groundwater conditions and have even brought back species once thought to be extinct. Humble in size, they have an outsized impact on the ecosystem. In just a few years, the countries where they're planted have already seen enormous benefits. The tiny forest movement shows the power of small, sustained efforts to tackle big problems like climate change, air quality, and endangered species. Kazui Fujiwara, a Japanese botany professor who's worked on this issue, writes, "A Miyawaki forest may be like a drop of rain falling into the ocean. But if Miyawaki forests regenerate urban deserts and degraded areas around the world, it will create a river." And she adds, "Doing nothing is the most pointless thing." I hold that lesson close in these difficult times, when it's so easy to believe that nothing changes and nothing gets better. Despair is disabling. It blinds us to the real significance of our acts. It lies to us, telling us that we're powerless and our deeds are pointless. But doing nothing is the most pointless thing. The Torah reminds us on these holy days of the need to overcome this debilitating spiritual blindness. In the reading for the first day of Rosh Hashanah, Hagar, lost in the wilderness, believes that her child will soon be dead. Then she hears a divine call, her eyes are opened, and she sees a well of water. In the reading for today, Avraham, standing in fear on a mountain, believes that his child will soon be dead. Then he hears a divine call, his eyes are opened, and he sees a ram caught in the thicket. Both Hagar and Avraham are trapped in darkness. They think there's no way out, but then they hear a different message, and they believe it. Suddenly, for each of them, the world looks different. There are new possibilities. Life has new meaning and purpose. They get up, they go forward in strength and in hope. That's what I think Rabbi Arthur Green was saying to the future leaders of our people at the JTS commencement. And it's a message for us as well, as we greet the dawn of a new year. He spoke about the problems we face today because his eyes are fully open to those problems, but they are open as well to possibility and hope. "I'm now near the end of my creative course," he said, "but you young people are just at the beginning of yours. In other words, see where you are needed and go there. Plant seeds of goodness. In the midst of the wilderness, make a green forest and help it to flourish. Confront the challenge. Don't give up. Don't disengage. And know that your efforts matter. In my 82 years, I have done my best. Now I entrust the task to you. And I believe with all my heart that if we work together, the world will get better. Go forward," he said. "Go forward in strength. Go forward, l'chaim, to life. Shana tova."